Yeah, I guess we can get started
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
One of these experiences, which I feel is quite unique to people in tech, is once people, at least software developers in tech, is once people find out that you can program, that you can
Yeah.
build apps, all of a sudden they start asking you to build them things, or they start pitching you ideas. Sometimes it's flattering, like especially when you're starting out, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But the more more experience you have, the longer you've been in it, it just really gets kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Especially when people aren't approaching you the right way. Again, you'll just be trying to enjoy your day. All of a sudden, you get a message from somebody you haven't spoke to in 5 years,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Hey, I heard you write apps, or I heard you can build me this thing. I've got this great idea. It's gonna make us millions." And like, okay, what is it? And then they tell you the most generic idea ever, and it's like, oh, can we do it? And they'll tell you the budget's like $100.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, don't have the time of day to spend with them and educate them on everything they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to know your experiences with that, and if you have any, I guess, words of wisdom for aspiring entrepreneurs and what they get wrong when trying to approach a partner,
Yeah.
technical partner.
So I've had this experience quite a lot recently. And you're right. In the beginning of your career, I feel like it happens more. Maybe it's like a mentality thing. Like you yourself are more in that early entrepreneur or early developer stage. So you're kind of around more so people that are, I want to say, also new to the space, but not necessarily devs themselves. I had this experience recently because I was doing some remote work, doing the digital nomad life out in Bali. And in Bali, it's like a hotbed for aspiring entrepreneurs. Let's call it that. And I definitely felt it a lot more, right? People, as you get to know people, it's a lot more open of a environment. Everyone's meeting each other because it's a place where so many people come and go that you're constantly meeting new people and working on, I guess, like your own pitch. And everyone's really there trying to utilize the fact that it's so cheap in order to use it as a launch pad for entrepreneurial endeavors, which is fine, right? That's cool that this place has this environment. But as a result, as you mentioned, it is interesting that, and honestly a little irritating, every time people hear that you're an engineer, especially if you have experience, that they want you to be their technical founder or they want you to build their thing. They're asking you for, I guess, not just advice, but like to hire you. All of those things, which honestly can be flattering in the beginning, but then that gap that you're talking about absolutely does get on your nerves in the fact that it's missing. And it's not their fault, right? It's something that has to be filled. And I think that the gap mostly has to do with just the complexity of building and scaling applications from a technical angle that they're expecting you to do. They don't even know how complex it is. It's like coming up to somebody who has a toolbox and being like, hey, can you build me a house? Right? It's just, you're missing the mark so huge there.
Right.
But then on top of that, there's also a lack of understanding of how deep and how wide the software industry business is altogether. It's kind of got, I guess, an enticing appeal for founders, entrepreneurs, because it's like, wow, Google was built in a garage. We can do that, right? It's selling this image of hustlers and young founders who can do it bootstrapped with like nothing, which was true back in the day, I think. That's the big thing. So I think for a lot of new founders, one of the big things is understanding that those stories and those environments are much, much rarer than they were before. It's much fewer and far between that you can kind of get started like that out of a garage anymore. You can, as I say, you can't. You can get started somewhere, but there's a much more significant validation cost and piece to it now.
So you think the barrier to entry is actually higher now than it was, let's
so
say,
much
10,
higher.
20 years ago?
Yeah, because it's a gold rush, right? I think it was like, if you even use it as a metaphor for a gold rush, when you first dug into the ground and you found gold, you struck gold, you were like, wow, this is crazy. And then people start catching wind of it. Everyone comes, people start, extracting the gold out of it. They start building an industry around it. You have like massive players coming in, and you're taking out a lot of the resources in there. It's not to say that there's no, the pie, I mean, the pie is huge. There's still always room to carve out a space, etc. But you're not competing in a space that is small anymore, right? Software has eaten the world already. We're past that point. Everyone knows software is the place to be when it comes to a lot of innovation. It's a massive branch that everyone with any kind of money, any kind of influence is really aware of now. And while there is still space for a lot of digital transformation, digital innovation, the game is played at a much higher caliber now. So you have to come in, I think, as a non-technical founder, trying to match that level and that caliber now.
So you need to be a little bit more prepared, have done your homework.
Exactly.
So I guess, what are some examples of that, again, people approaching you with this half-baked idea?
Yeah.
Clearly, they haven't done any research. What are some of the things that they can do to, again, show up more prepared?
Yeah.
So that someone like you with experience has been around the block a few times will actually take them seriously in their pitch.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the pitch, there's a big piece of it where I know that I can do the technical portion of the work when it comes to building a software business. I can even pull in the team, right? I could easily pull you into this. I'm like, I got a network of expansive CTOs or extensive senior engineers, products people who can take the product and actually figure out what it is that the end consumer is going to resonate with so that the product takes off. At least we can give it the best shot we can. I know that I can bring that side to the table. That means that the other side of it, which is the business side of it, the marketing side of it, the analytics side of it, the validation side of it, I want to see it. Distribution, right? The legal, like a lot of those considerations that are not the technical or the product side of it, I want to know that I can trust you to handle. So if you come to me with an idea are a dime a dozen. I need to know that there is work done there to validate or prove that whatever it is that you have in mind is something that actually makes sense, right? It's got to meet me at the level of the experience and the network I'm bringing in. Because we say that, like, in business, there's really three things that you need, right? You need human capital, financial capital, or I guess like network capital, right? Human capital being like the talent, financial capital being like the money to actually build and pay for things. And then the network capital is like, do you have familiarity in the industry? Do you have people in your network who are like gatekeepers that can make that process of figuring that out and getting these things into the hands of people, or just like getting them in the hands of businesses, whatever your business model is? Do you have that sorted to some degree? Doesn't have to be super massive, but it's got to be something.
Some idea, some plan, or some strategy on how to address problems when they come up.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Because the technical half I can handle. I can tell you what, you don't even need to know as the other side of the founder. I'm going to figure that out. Right. And given the experience, when you approach technical people who have a lot of experience and have been around the block like that, they have earned your trust because all the companies that have hired them is their rap sheet of what they've accomplished, right? They've been the senior engineers, or they've been the VPs, they've been the CTOs, they've been the founders. They know, and that they are portraying and giving out that trust, right? So if you come to me, you have to know that you got to match me in some way to that level. I'm not saying that you can't be a first-time founder,
right?
Or you have to have this extensive experience on the business side of software, or the business side of something. I'm not saying that, but you have to come with a level of professionalism, knowing what you're approaching is somebody who has like a lot of opportunities and a lot of confidence in themselves what they deliver. So in that approach, I think if people came with more of that work done, like market validation in some way, showing me that you've built some kind of pitch deck, some kind of initial, maybe not a product per se. Of
like
course, that would be nice.
Just putting a document together, like
exactly.
Having that research done.
Yeah, sell it to me. Like I know you're gonna have to sell it to investors, or you're gonna have to sell it to somebody who you're trying.
And
to
I mean, really,
with.
You then become the first investor in this idea. Maybe not with like an actual monetary investment, but
Yeah.
you are going to be investing your time
Yeah.
and making sacrifices to build this product, right? So
Yeah.
they also need to be able to convince you to
Yeah.
come on board and work with them.
Yeah.
And you actually mentioned something interesting because the approach is almost like, again, a VC would look at it, or even like an angel investor
Mm-hmm.
would look at that idea and that product. And in there, the experience of the founder or aspiring entrepreneur does play a role.
Yeah.
Whether a first time founder, second time, third time, or I've done this multiple times, right? There's that trust, or you know that they've earned their stripes
Yeah.
in a sense. They've been through the ups and downs. They kind of know what to expect. This isn't something that they're just picking up as a hobby and are going to abandon a few months later. So when you're looking at that from a founder's perspective, would you be more drawn to a founder looking to build like a unicorn VC backed startup, or a founder that wanted to take more of a longer term approach, build sustainably and just bootstrap?
I think it varies based on the founder themselves and to some degree the business plan, but also kind of once I'm on board and we're going through that journey together, a lot of it you'll kind of unveil as you go, whether or not you have a shot at even being a unicorn per se. I think that's like maybe market size and your ability to execute in that space will determine that for me. Personally, I think that I'm less of a unicorn building kind of person / founder just because it's alluring. It's the big dream. But in reality, it's so hyper rare that if your goal is to build a unicorn, and as nice as that is to say, the end result doesn't always get you there. And the cost that you pay, being narrow-minded and being like, it's a unicorn or it's bust, right, is very detrimental, because a lot of the decisions that you make from a business standpoint, when you have the pressures of performing, you have the market that's like in front of you and you have to capture it, right? If you're so focused on the unicorn status, you oftentimes might make decisions where you grow too fast, right?
Right.
You overcommit in resourcing, you overcommit in engineering and building things. And those things have a cost that you pay for in some
Well, I
way.
mean, that's kind of the culture, right? Grow at all costs.
Yes.
And that cost is usually people's jobs. At the end of the
Exactly.
day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the stress of all that stuff. I'm actually curious for you, because you are a current technical founder and CTO live in a company right now. And as we're talking about this approach, you were successfully hunted by your partner, Mo. I'm very curious in that sense how he approached it that swung the other way for you, where he did convince you to get on board rather than, you just dismiss it in a different way.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of things that you mentioned were true in that scenario. I guess if I was looking in a non-technical founder, would be the fact that they've come with more than just an idea. And really what he came with was an opportunity. There was already alignment in my career and the point I was at and the challenges I wanted to take on next. This is something understood. Like, we had a relationship, and more importantly, a business relationship for 2-3 years before that, working on smaller projects, some projects for his nonprofit, did some contracted work for him as well. So there was already trust built up in an understanding of what he brought to the table as a contributor and what I brought to the table as a contributor.
Yeah.
So I also didn't feel like I was just being approached by someone that isn't actually familiar with me and how I work and what I can actually produce.
Yeah.
That was just like almost trying to get anybody on board that they can, which to me is a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
It made this much more of an easier acceptance
Interesting.
by the fact that we had worked together. He's familiar. So it didn't feel like I was ever overselling myself in any way. So that was very comfortable for me in that opportunity. But yeah, it is also interesting that the approach was more of a unicorn type vision.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're taking this thing to the moon.
To the IPO. Or not an IPO
IPO didn't get mentioned,
necessarily. Right, right.
but that was definitely
It's a $1
hopes and
billion
dreams.
plus business.
Yeah, there's hopes
Right.
and dreams of that idea at the time,
Mm.
and that was exciting. That was
Yeah.
alluring.
he-
Having gone through that experience,
And he brought funding in, right? He
and
already
funding
had
was already
acquired
there.
funding.
That was a key thing. Funding was already there on the table.
Yeah.
So it wasn't again half-baked idea of, oh, we have to do this and then that and then that. It was like, no, you've got the funding. We're gonna be building a team. You're gonna be on the ground floor. We have to build this thing. And again, we essentially got to make history
Yeah.
by launching the first type of product like this in Canada. So
Yeah.
that was really cool. But at the end of the day, kind of look back on it, it's like, yeah, it was nice, but it almost like a consolation prize.
Right.
It's not what we had set out to do.
Yeah. Well, the market shifted on you too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, so much luck and timing
Yeah.
goes into these success stories with startups, and they're extremely risky.
Can we go into more detail about that? Just in the sense that, like, I don't know how much of an NDA is, like, I still under, I guess, the constraints of what you've built, like, but I guess, like, can you allude to how that market changed? Because I think that's a really interesting lesson
I think,
in this process.
definitely. So the product we were looking to build and when we ended up launching was Benji Financial. It was a neobank for small businesses in Canada. Hadn't been done before. We had a banking partner that was working with us, and things were good until they weren't. We got to beta, and then again the market tightened up. The banking partner had to shut down, and then we no longer had a platform that we could build on top of.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were a major bank.
So this is one of the things, I guess, cautionary tales for new founders is be super careful when building on top of somebody else's platform or software.
Yeah.
Know that they're going to be around long enough for you to actually build your business and get it out there. We were too early that we didn't have the opportunity to switch onto a different platform. So that idea just had to go and get shut down.
Yeah.
As well.
So you had to pivot, essentially.
We had to pivot to something else.
But I mean, even with the new product, right? You guys pivoted and you recently launched the new product.
That's correct.
I love the new product. It's an incredible user experience.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think, like, there's very few products that have such an immediate value presentation right out the gate for somebody who's using it that immediately sees, oh, I get exactly what this product is doing for me. And I think from that stance, did Mo come to you with that design, that feature specifically already?
I mean, again, after the pivot, that was kind of, we took a step back, sat, ideated, picked a new direction, and then went from there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's also something, if you can, when looking for a co-founder, somebody to partner with, is trying to get a sense of how they're going to handle the ups and downs.
Right.
Yeah. Because for us, like, it happened, it sucked, it was tough.
Yeah.
But we both had the same mindset of, like, okay, on to the next thing. Let's keep it moving.
Roll it off the shoulder.
Just roll the punches, you know.
Yeah.
With other people, they might pack it in at that point and say, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And it'll be tough too, right? Like, it's a partnership. If one of you's down and ready to go again, but the other person's like, no, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
At that point, right? So I think it's good to know that you're partnering with somebody that is in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And wants to keep taking those shots, taking those chances.
Yeah. Like a mentality, like a grit, perseverance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
the road's bumpy.
Yeah.
It's bumpy.
Yeah, that's true. And I think especially approaching new people, you are unvetted in both directions, right? So alluding to what you talked about earlier with how you had done work with him already for both his nonprofit, you did some contract work, you had established a working relationship beyond the fact that you both knew each other, right? Because all three of us come from the same consultancy, Wrangle. And while we never worked together, there's like a kind of kinship about that, right? Like that we all come from that place, which was
for sure
held to such a high standard.
For sure.
That helped bridge that. But if you don't have that, then doing that legwork that he also did, which is to establish like what a working relationship with you is going to look like. He showed you that he was, serious in both the money that he put up and et cetera, right? Like you mentioned earlier, some people come in with this really low dollar amount of trying to be like, hey, we're gonna build it, we're gonna build it cheap, right? And it's like, I think when it comes to that, when people say that, that word means something different to you and I versus like I think
Right.
someone coming in.
Right.
If you think you're gonna build like your first MVP website for 10 grand, it's just like that's unrealistic, right?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the idea. I think it comes down to the market you're in. Also
Sometimes
your
you
level of
can.
quality. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there needs to be alignment on what's actually trying to be accomplished at that stage.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely think depending on who you are, what
Yeah.
your skill set is, and the complementing skill set you're trying to find,
Mm-hmm.
all those things kind of matter, depending if you're going like in the VC route or going bootstrapper route. And one of the things I know it's difficult for people is figuring out where to even go to find somebody that they can work with and partner with on projects.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as you mentioned, we're all kind of lucky that we work throughout the same company,
Yeah.
so we're able to meet each other that way. But again, if you aren't in tech or you aren't at a company in which you can find people to partner with, it can be difficult. Like I know for some bootstrappers looking for people to partner with, like there's websites like Indie Hackers,
Yeah.
Polywork is another one where people can go and post work and collaborate on things, and that's could be a good way to again work on smaller projects
Yeah.
and get a feel for your working relationship with somebody before trying to take on something bigger
Yeah.
and more stressful. But for like VC backed founders, it might be a little bit more difficult to find people on those platforms.
Yeah.
And I imagine it might, depending on who you're getting the funding from and how far along you are in the idea, just reaching out to like that VC and seeing if they have people in their network that they can partner you with.
Yeah.
Accelerators or incubators are also another kind of great resource there. And AngelList, I guess, which is now renamed to WellFound, is another spot you can try to find.
Did they rename? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is Naval still he's still on the board of
I'm
that?
not too sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Exactly, but yeah.
Oh, well found.
Yeah.
I kind of like that name.
It's kind of clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think that with what you're touching upon too, what's interesting is that there are, I don't want to say there's levels to this thing, right? In the sense that like
There definitely is though.
there is, there
definitely is.
absolutely is. But I don't want to say it in a way where it's like tiered and you can't break into another level.
Agreed. You absolutely can. I mean, I think there needs to be the thought put in
Yes.
to understand what you're going after. Again, the questions that we're asking each other here are from the perspective of senior engineer
Yeah.
and what we'd expect to see in a co-founder,
Yes.
given our experience.
Yeah.
Which isn't going to be the case if you're just trying to get into tech or you're looking
Yeah.
to partner with maybe a junior or intermediate
Yeah.
developer.
But there's a cost to doing that too, right?
There is.
Yes.
There is for sure.
I think part of, before we even get into what that cost is, and honestly, it's largely financial. You're trading financial for experience, right? But even if you approach a senior engineer, let's say you don't have a lot of the exposure, the experience, right? The acumen, the network, right? Or even like perhaps you don't have experience covering some of the marketing, some of the sales, some of the validation work. You have the motivation, right? You have the work ethic, you have the desire, you have the drive. That's fantastic, right?
I mean, it's foundational.
Foundational, right? And if I can tell that you're going to charismatically even sell me on it, I can buy in, right? But I know that you don't have those other things. So at the very least, do you have the capital? Can you go get that capital, right? That is extremely crucial because it's unrealistic to sell someone on a dream. And as much as like the dream is important and you want people on board, I think one thing for a lot of non-technical founders or just eager founders, eager entrepreneurs in general to really ask themselves is, are you using that dream and motivation as an excuse, right? And you're not realistically looking at the situation and what you're offering, right? And you're hand waving away what it is that you're asking for. Because if you're approaching a really senior, not even just a senior engineer, but a senior technical person who has held leadership positions and done a lot of the strategic work and even some of the business tech overlapping work. That's an ideal founder from an experience standpoint that you're going after, right? You have to understand the market that they're in. And if you're going to try and sway them with just hopes and dreams, right? And even some of this stuff, it's just unrealistic. It's quite frankly a little insulting in a lot of ways, right? So I think, of course, we all understand that if we don't have that much, we have to be able to be motivated enough to compete. But you also have to understand where the other person's sitting, right? And it's fine if you don't have all that capital, but even recognizing that, right? And saying that, like, that's something that we can get, right? But let me give you something for now, or let me put something into this pot for now.
Right. So
is important too.
when you're talking of capital there, are you thinking just for like salary? Just enough to even pay the person to work on your project, whether it is full-time or part-time?
It depends on how much you're asking for, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's different paths that you can approach that. If you're asking for me to work on it full-time, or if like, let's say, like oftentimes founders don't even know that, right? They're like, I want this built. And I ask you, how much of it have you built already? It's like nothing. There's no existing app for it, right?
Right.
Knowing that, and I start like thinking about what it needs to be built. If I'm like, oh man, this is a full-time thing. It's like at least 40-hour a week thing, right? For me to be willing to put that kind of time in, I'm saying no to everything else on my plate, right? A lot of other opportunities. And a lot of times we're working either full-time or we're working on existing contracts that take that time, right? And we have things like family, other projects, right? We have all of our side hustles and that stuff. To draw me to put more time into this thing, the opportunity has to be more than just a pipe dream, right? Like,
Right.
that's the thing about the ideas, right? Ideas are ideas. The execution is like 99% of it.
Right.
You know?
So what if somebody came to you then, and so do you think like the equity play is a bit of a pipe dream? If they say, I want to do this 50%, 50%.
Yeah, I think the equity play, it's an interesting one because for sure the equity is important, right? But it's equity of what, right? Now, I'm not saying that it has to be in a place where there's obvious value already that I'm getting, although that definitely helps. If you come to me with something where some people have already backed it, and there is even like an estimate of evaluation that like formats in some kind of traditional methodology, right? Like usually the idea is that whatever's been invested is worth 15 to 20% of what the actual valuation is. So if there's 100,000 invested already, then you can estimate that it's somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 valuation. It's not real until it sells. It's just a number on paper. It doesn't mean anything, right? But it's more than nothing to some degree. So the equity there has some more value, right? But I think that it's really challenging because unless the idea really is something that I'm like, wow, that's worth getting in now on, then I do expect some type of additional financial compensation. Now, let's say that's not the play, right? You're like, I can't afford to pay you because all that money has to go in validating this idea, right?
So I think that's one of the key things here too, right? Is a lot of the capital necessarily isn't just for paying salaries.
Yeah.
It's for that idea validation piece.
Yes.
For that marketing.
Yes.
Legal fees.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of like additional things that people don't consider up front. And also who you're going after and their financial position. Like if they've been working at, I don't know, a FANG company for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Chances are they're probably more receptive to actually working on just an equity basis.
That is
cash for
true.
them isn't, going to be a big motivator.
That's true.
They're probably doing all right.
That's true.
In that regard.
Yes.
And that way you might be able to entice them with that. Okay, here's a little bit of equity. The capital that we do have is going to be spent towards marketing.
Yes.
Towards these legal fees, taking care of that side, again, the business side, because you need that to operate. So, yeah, I think that is also a consideration in who you're going after. Whereas if you're going after like a junior, somebody fresh out of school, they might be less expensive from a salary perspective, but they are probably looking to get paid because, they're just starting out.
That's
kind
true.
of want that money, right?
That is true. And that's definitely going to be a motivator for them too, knowing that if they stick to doing the traditional path, they can get paid because the market, even though there's downturn, et cetera, it's still a market in favor of engineers. We make
that being said,
salaries.
The other play for, I guess, junior intermediate devs, if you're looking to recruit them, is the experience.
Yes.
Whereas, hey, here's a almost like treat like a side project or
Yeah.
a side hustle.
Yeah.
Because junior intermediate devs, chances are they have at least one, if not two, three side projects that they're working on just to be able to try out some new technology, improve their skills to get a promotion at work.
Yeah.
So if you can pitch it that way, and if you give them the freedom to use the stack that they want to use, you might be able to get people like, oh, well, I was going to do a project using this technology anyways. I guess I could build it that meets your requirements for your idea. And then, you know, they can take you maybe 30% of the way there, 40% of the way there, get a proof of concept, and then you can just take it from there and move on. But there's a danger and a risk in that as well.
Yeah. You're eating their practice, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And even beyond that, like you can't really even evaluate whether it is practice or not. It's such a wide spectrum and quality in the output of that technical portion that if you are non-technical, you have no clue what is being built. You have no clue what pitfalls, what traps, right? What corners have been cut.
Yeah. And it might work from a visual perspective. Like they might give you an app or a website. You can click around. It does the thing that you expect it to do. But how it was built, there might be lots of bugs.
Yeah.
Might be a lot of security vulnerabilities baked into it. And it just be a maintenance nightmare where if we try to hire somebody else to go work on it, it's going to take them 3 times as long, 3 times expensive to fix or make those changes because of how it was initially built.
Yeah. And you can't even, you have no idea whether you can or can't trust them, right? And you kind of know walking into that.
Right.
But it's risk mitigation at the end of the day. You are taking that risk doing that in order to offset the cost from all those other different ways, not even just financial that we were talking about, right?
Right.
Of hiring or bringing on a senior.
So let's switch gears here a little bit. I'm curious. Again, we've been pitched some wild ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about maybe some of the unconventional ideas that you've been pitched in your career.
Yeah. So, you know what? I think a good one that was a big lesson learned for me, and maybe hopefully for anyone listening that's a new founder, an aspiring founder, was that when I first became an engineer, I'll tell one from the beginning and then one from recent memory.
Okay, cool.
Right. When I first became an engineer, one of my fellow people who became one with me, because we did a boot camp together. That's how I switched over from owning a gym into becoming a software engineer.
The traditional path then.
Yeah. Was that he had an ex-wife who started a English school in China, and it was doing really well. In fact, I think she was opening her second school at that point, right? So like a second location.
Right.
And there was a huge demand in China. This was around 2013, 2014 for English. So we wanted to build a platform that connected tutors and students. So it was almost like a marketplace. It was a marketplace application, pretty much what you would expect, kind of like an eBay or an Airbnb. Those are all marketplaces where you're creating a place where someone provides a service and then somebody buys the service, which for us was specifically English tutoring. Now, we thought it'd be easy because we had some more of the network, right, where we had the potential student inflow coming from the school. And also we had the experience. So maybe we can navigate more of the industry. We had some more expertise, etc. The problem, though, is that you think that's the case. But when building a product, right, and we did it. We built an initial version of the product. We trademarked it, branded it, everything. But we did it scrapped together as 2 new engineers that were building it. We were leveraging a lot of tools. And when you're building a lot of things as a junior or as an intermediate, you're looking at the tooling and you're looking at stuff that you don't understand. So you're trying to make it work. And once it works, you're not fully understanding why it works and some of the problems that having made it work this way is going to bring about. You just are so glad that it works and you're just praying. You're like, okay, this gets me to the next step. And it's a lot of those insidious decisions that get made over and over and over again that get you to a place where when the whole tower starts to fall, you don't even know why, right? But it's also a habit you've gotten into. And this is like the overly scrappy # entrepreneur approach to when you actually start building a thing. And while it was less the pitch, like the idea, I felt like from a standpoint sitting there that it was good and it was valid. It was that lack of experience, right? And the fact that the product itself wasn't necessarily validated. We didn't even know if students wanted to use an online platform to learn English, right? And a lot of that tutoring came from a largely relational basis, and there were cultural differences. You might have English teachers that we were bringing in from Canada and from this side of the world, but then there were so many cultural, personal like conflicts with the students on the other side that that we didn't even anticipate that was making it so that the product wasn't working, right? Like there was so much to it, so much more work to it because it's a product that has to manage two different customer bases. You have to manage the tutors,
Right.
and then you have to manage the actual students, which splits the amount of work that you have to dedicate to, right? Because the tutors are expecting one product almost,
Mhm.
and then the students are expecting a different product. And I think from that size of it, it's just the scope of it was much larger than what was initially pitched, right? And I think it's that kind of stuff that was partly my fault, right? And not knowing the industry. So from the standpoint of a non-technical person that was starting to become technical and learning that stuff, that piece of product building is so huge, right? And working in the product space and paying your tuition to learn those lessons, humongous, massive. It cannot be described how complicated it is to build a good product, right? It's like, it's just so much to it that you have to just start chewing at it, and you have to treat it with like an enormous amount of respect, right? That it's not something that you're just gonna figure out overnight. That's probably the first thing. The second one, I would say, in terms of like kind of like a really wild pitch. I mean, like, everyone always talks about like, I want to build Uber for this. I want to build Airbnb for this, right? I want to build Tinder for dogs. That's like, there's all these like X for X type
Right.
business pitches. Those are crazy. Those aren't even like, those are so common and hilarious. But I think one that has a more interesting, I guess, like lesson in it was I was in Corfu in Greece, and over there was a guy who we were renting a car from, and he was really interesting in the sense that he kind of had a large amount of the market share of providing and renting vehicles to drive around the island, but he wasn't able to handle as much bookings as he wanted to because there was so much interest. So he wanted to create an online platform for all the people coming so that he could partner with like agencies, he could partner with travel agencies to offer his booking through there. But he wanted somebody to build everything. Like he barely even had a website, and he wanted to hire me to build this whole thing, right? And that was an interesting pitch in the sense that he already was in the space and he knew what he wanted. But he was fixed on this idea of doing it all from scratch, right? Because I think like for him, I was like talking about how, well, maybe it'd be better if you build existing tools. Like from where I'm sitting, this booking tool is probably something that already exists, right? You could probably build UI and whatever, but he was so hyper fixed on doing it all from scratch. And I didn't really understand why. Like talking to him, maybe there was a language barrier or something, but he just wanted somebody to handle the whole thing, right? And I was like, well, maybe you should find somebody who's a specialist in using these tools specifically, right? You can find, not necessarily saying it's Shopify, but there are like these platform-specific versions of devs that you can bring on where they focus on working with that tool, right? Rather than hiring somebody whose job is to build software from scratch. I think that's an interesting one because from a founder perspective, like there's different versions of what you're looking to build that can be done with tools that don't require like a typical software engineer.
Right. So we're gonna touch on
Yeah.
kind of the platform pieces there.
Yeah. You know, I think that those are two cases, less about like wacky pitches, but more just like the most interesting ones that I think kind of highlight this topic that we're talking about, where it's like different styles of how you can approach finding technical founders or just finding somebody technical to help you work on things.
Right.
Those are the kind of pitfalls that I think are immediately helpful to help you navigate what that looks
Right.
like, right? Like if you're building e-commerce, for example, everyone knows the Shopify. So the Shopify developers, right, that
Mm-hmm.
specialize in using Shopify. You don't necessarily need to build it in from scratch. You can use Shopify. Or if you want to build landing pages, right, use Webflow. Those are platforms where you don't need to consistently bother a developer to make changes to, which is expensive. You can go in if you wanted to change some of the copy. Maybe they help you set it up. They understand how more of it works.
Right.
But it's like it reduces a lot of some of the overhead from a technical perspective that is needed, and drastically reduces the amount of engineering resource cost to it that you can utilize that to achieve the goal anyways, whether it be a marketing goal or a validation goal.
Right. So it's funny. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I feel like you've actually been pitched some more promising ideas.
What have you heard before? What's the craziest ones you've seen?
Yeah. So this was back in school actually,
Okay.
when I was doing comp sci degree, and had his classmate, wasn't in tech, in business. This individual had a lot of ideas. I felt like it was a new idea like every week, and this is something again I respect about them. Someone that has ideas, constantly like iterating on ideas, and had that entrepreneurial drive. And this was around the time Uber was really new, because it hadn't even reached our university town yet.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah, so the problem was, students, we'd go out on the weekend, go downtown, and trying to get a cab back at 12, 1, 2 in the morning was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
One, you had to call up the cabs, say I'm going to be here. They have to wait and hope nobody takes your cab,
Right. Because they don't care.
because hey, they're getting paid anyways.
That's right.
Right? So it was a bit of a nightmare there. So the idea was, hey, let's build a new cab service. We'll make it digital. We'll build an app, and we can see the validation for this idea in Uber in the States.
Right.
And from that perspective, like, oh yeah, it's actually really clever. I mean, the idea has already been validated by a competitor. They're not in this market.
Yeah.
We can build this up. The education in terms of consumer education
Mm-hmm.
is lower,
Yeah.
because people are already familiar with that brand name.
Right.
And again, we don't need to get the cars. We'll just build the app. Again, this is what we're thinking as university students, right? Like, oh, we'll just build the app,
Yeah.
and it'll be great. And trying to put the team together was tough. It was really tough. Like, I was holding down the technical side by myself. We had a marketing student.
Yeah.
We had him in business. But we never even got to a beta product. But looking back on it now, I am actually, it was a good experience, but way over our heads.
Yeah.
In terms of actually bringing it to fruition. Because even if we did get the MVP app out, and that's something people can use, we hadn't solved the supply of drivers.
Right.
That was something we hadn't even figured out yet.
Yeah.
We just assumed like, oh, people are going to want to drive because they want to make money.
Yeah.
Right. But with that, there was no standardized way of vetting drivers, their vehicles, their backgrounds, anything.
Yeah.
Like a huge legal nightmare,
Mm-hmm.
potentially. Right. Essentially, you're just building this app, having random people drive drunk university kids home.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like,
Oh, man.
you don't even know if these drivers themselves could also be university kids that have been drinking that night, drive home.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just glad that business didn't get off the ground, because that's not somewhere I want to be. We didn't have the war chest that Uber has,
Yeah.
to handle those situations. So that could have been very, very bad. But that one didn't go anywhere. But again, the pitch, the approach was done. Like, this is really, he had business plan, like multi-page PDF sent. He's like, this is who we're going to talk to.
Yeah.
We're going to get this together. And it all looked good. But I think what it lacked was, the actual ability to actually execute on the idea.
Yeah.
There's research done, but in actuality, it wouldn't have worked. And then when that one failed, he approached me for another idea. in which he's like, oh, we need a new dating app,
Okay.
a new companionship type app, right?
Yeah.
He said, because there's a problem, right? I think the inspiration came from somebody in his class, and she had been going on dates
Yeah.
with an older gentleman who would buy her dinner, pay for textbooks, tuition, sort of like a sugar daddy,
Like a sugar baby. Yeah. Okay.
right?
Right.
And he, again, very enterprising, saw a gap for this. Like, hey, how'd you find this individual? And I think the answer was like very vague what she gave him. But he was like, hey,
Right.
there should be a more popular way
Yeah.
that people could take advantage of this,
Yeah.
and I can get my cut.
Yeah.
So we wanted to build an app that would match, people looking for sugar babies.
Yeah.
With,
Like what Seeking Arrangements is now.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is back in like what 2014.
Right. Right.
And for that idea, I just had to say no.
Yeah. That
That
could
it just
become a
and
sex service real quick.
like instantly,
Yeah.
and at least just for me, that wasn't a business I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
So I had to say no to that, and that's why I was the wrong partner for that idea.
Right.
And I'm also so leads me to the next question. In terms of these ideas, you're being pitched.
Yeah.
Let's say the non-technical founder or whatever their background might be approach you. The idea was great. Everything looks solid. When do you know, from a technical standpoint, that maybe this isn't the right idea for you?
Interesting. I think that a lot of it has to do with whether or not, well, it depends on what they're bringing to the table to tackle the type of business that they're looking to build. Because to some degree, I think that we've discussed this a lot, right? Is that there are different categories that you can bucket the majority of applications into. There's social media platforms, there's marketplace platforms, which I was kind of talking about some of the pros and cons of doing that. There's SaaS, right? Software as a service, where you build some type of service platform that does some specific business function most of the times that you sell to enterprise customers. And then there's like social media, dating, etc., right? And I think depending on what they're presenting, some of them I know are technically massive. And if I don't have a lot of the background in having worked in that space specifically, it's challenging for me, not to say that I wouldn't go for it, right? Because at this point in our careers, we know that we can tackle the majority of anything. It's just a matter of, is there enough time and resource to do it?
So let's pick one then.
Yeah.
Let's go with, because you already mentioned the marketplace idea that you did.
Yeah.
Let's choose like social media as an example.
Okay.
Somebody comes to you, said, I got this great new social media idea.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about?
With social media, the challenge is that so there's multiple challenges. The first one is that the existing mentality around social media is that it's a service that most customers have for free. There are some that are gated behind some kind of paywall, but the majority of it is free use, right? And because it's free use, the name of the game is that you have to manage like people putting content on there, right? If your model is content-based social media, like you want to do an Instagram, you want to do a TikTok, you want to do a YouTube.
A new Twitter
or something, right? You need people to be able to produce content, and that's one huge, massive piece to figure out. And then another one is like, from a technical standpoint, the cost of that usage, right? Social media is really generating revenue and money from advertisers. They have I have an absolute ton of eyes in the platform. They're trying to maximize engagement, so using it, and then advertisers put ads in there. It's kind of like TV, right? The more TV you watch, the more ads you watch, the more the network gets paid, and in turn, the more money that the social media platform makes. But if, from that perspective, you have to figure that out. You have to find advertisers, make that enticing, which means you have to be able to prove that you can get people on the platform, get them engaged on the platform, which means content, and it means an influx of users who are using directly content and increasing the amount of time they use it. But all of that usage is an enormous cost on the technical system itself, right? Which is really expensive from an infrastructure standpoint, right? That technical infrastructure you're constantly paying for. That means that from that perspective, you have to have capital out the gate, or you have to be able to raise that money, right? Because it's very rare that that business is profitable from the jump, which means that
Right.
you're automatically now approaching it from a fundraising standpoint. And if you're and knowing that it's going to be a fundraising standpoint, I need certainty to some degree that you can navigate that, or at least I have confidence that if you've never done it before, that you have the network or you have some of the things that like those VCs are enticed by
Right.
that you bring to the table so that you can
Right.
get the money. Because I can already tell up front that cost is massive. Who's going to start paying for that? It's
Right.
not building the platform.
Social media
is
isn't
nothing.
typically a bootstrapped
No,
venture. No.
it's not. No. Now there might be interesting ways that you can make it a product that is gated. I just don't know how many there are that go that way.
Right. I feel like it'd have to be like the value would have to already be present from day one. And the problem with social media is,
Yeah.
again, when Facebook came out, MySpace came out, you're on there because your friends are on there.
Yeah.
Right. And it'd be much easier to get somebody to pay for this a platform if there's already people there that they want to interact with
Yeah.
or to be a part of this exclusive club, which is why I think it's easier to have these almost paywall communities for somebody that has an audience and says, okay, I'm going to spin off a closed community that you need to pay for entry. And it's only going to be like the truest fans.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you're like paying for the exclusivity of that. But it's hard to
Yeah.
get that from the gate when there is no value tied to your brand
Yeah.
or what you're offering.
Unless you somehow know that network of people
Yeah,
who
like,
you can
For
pull
sure.
on, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have that type of audience or clout, then it's so much easier to,
Yeah.
again, build a social media platform or some kind of community off of that.
Would you say that OnlyFans is a social media application? Because that's one where you pay outright, right? It's profitable in that sense.
You know, yeah, my definition of social media kind of flips and changes depending on the platform. Like, I think it's easy to say and see that Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all social media.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get to things like, is Discord social media?
Yeah.
Is OnlyFans social media?
Yeah.
Is even like Substack
Right.
social media?
Yeah.
Then there's elements again that are social. There's elements that are media. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess based on my definition,
Yeah.
social media, I would say OnlyFans is social media.
Right. Yeah. And that is a model where you can make it work like profitability wise out the gate. But again, as you mentioned earlier, right, the value is very clearly already in the platform. And that's what you're paying for, right? So in that sense, like people were already previously paying for this type of value that you've now just digitized and democratized and spread, right? You're just creating more so a distribution model online for something that already people were willing to pay for.
Right.
Which in
Yeah,
that sense,
just new approach on the distribution.
yeah. So if you could approach it from that standpoint, then that would be an angle where, I think if you can identify that type of opportunity, then I would be more keen to get involved there, right? I think a lot of it is going to be in that analysis piece of showing that validation to me, even, right? As you mentioned, the first investor, that this is something people are already doing. We're just digitizing it because the technology is just a tool. It's a means to an end, right? It can't be the end itself. So in that sense, like it's already something people are doing. It makes sense to digitally transform
Right.
that.
I mean, the behavior is already there.
Exactly.
Even from a digital standpoint.
Yeah.
It's already there. So
Yeah.
you're
But
just capitalizing on a new way.
And maybe that's the type of investor, or sorry, that's the type of founder that I am. I
Right.
need more of that validation, right?
Right.
I'm not necessarily as much of a, I've got this incredible new idea, right?
Right. It's going to revolutionize the world.
Yeah. And maybe I'm jaded. I'm almost a little turned off by that. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't be swayed.
You would never gonna have a movie made about you
Exactly.
with that mentality.
I know.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. It's not gonna, I'm not gonna get Ashton Kutcher to play me in that.
No,
Yeah.
no, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one made a movie about somebody playing it safe.
That's true.
Or like,
That's true.
Yeah.
But maybe one day something like that will sway me, right? I never want to never say never.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about another one? So again, talked about marketplaces, social media.
Mhm.
I think another red flag type of idea for me is content streaming.
Why is that one? Actually, define that and then give me
So
your
when I
take
think
on
of
why.
content streaming, I'm thinking something like building a YouTube competitor, a
Mm.
Spotify, Apple Music competitor.
Mm. What about like
Those
a little bit like Twitch? Would you say like live streaming is also in that category?
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it is a red flag. It's one of those ideas where if somebody pitched it to me, I'd probably like, I don't know about that. I don't think I'm the right person to see that through.
Is it because technically it's like streaming itself is demanding? It's more like network than software per se?
It is demanding from a technical perspective, but I think it's more from the longevity of just the product idea itself.
Mm.
Like, if it was a one-off project,
Mm.
contract, someone said, "Hey, I have this idea. Can you
Mhm.
build it for me?" The money was right. It's kind of
Mhm.
like, all right,
Mhm.
we can do that.
Yeah.
But if someone's like, "Hey, partner with me, build this business with me," I don't think it's that. I'm just not the right person for it.
Why is that? What is it about?
Yeah, I think
that for you?
it's difficult because for me, it's again the technology is a means to the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unless you've really figured out how you're going to generate all that content,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for me to see it as a viable business
Right. But if they
long term.
if they did
If they
figure
were
that out.
sitting on a gold mine of content and just said,
Mhm.
"Hey, we just need to build a platform to distribute it," yeah, you're gonna have my attention
Right.
for sure with that.
Right.
But then what's the plan to actually get eyeballs on it and market it? That's
And-
another problem to solve. But
Right.
because I mean, YouTube is who's competing with YouTube right now?
Yeah, that's true.
They have all the content you could ever want.
Yeah.
Everybody that's producing content is there. Same thing with like Spotify. Anyone that's making music
Mm-hmm.
usually has their catalog on Spotify.
Yeah.
And even just think about the margins as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough.
Streaming is expensive, right?
Like unless you're gonna be streaming music you can't get anywhere else that has that mass appeal, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and not to mention that most people who are making music are looking to get attention regardless, right? Like the pool of people that want to
Yeah.
privatize it but aren't maybe famous or, they want more attention. So I guess how niche is that market, right? As you mentioned, where they want to
Yeah.
gate it.
Like what's the discoverability?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, and maybe somebody can prove that that's untrue, but that's the thing. Those would be the things that you're right that a person would have to prove.
yeah. It's just one of those things where someone says, "Hey, I want to build a new Spotify or I want to build a new YouTube for this niche." I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's not me.
yeah, and I think on that, I guess like with YouTube, one of the things that we see through how YouTube has grown, and a lot of these like more free models go, right, is that they grow to a point where they have so much market share that they then figure out unit economics and revenue after. Once they have so much,
Right.
you can't go anywhere else.
So again, it's suggesting you need to be VC backed
Yeah.
or just be sitting on all that capital to kind of burn through
Yes.
in developing and capturing that market share.
Yeah.
So not a bootstrap friendly business.
Yeah. And I guess like it does seem like there's a lot of businesses that do go that way, right? I would even say that ride sharing marketplaces
Yeah.
typically are that flavor. because if you're doing something that you're competing with an existing price point, right? Like let's say, now these are older examples, so again, the environment has shifted, right? But if we take Airbnb versus hotels and then Uber versus taxis, there's an existing nearly trillion-dollar industry in those two categories, right? Well, taxis less so, but definitely rentals, like hotels, etc. You're competing against giants. They figured out a price point where, of course, they have to manage their costs, but that is what the price is already set for you. So if you have to figure out how to make it match that price point, like as an Airbnb, you have a number that you have to work with already and adjust all of your costs around, and that oftentimes is grossly expensive because you don't have economics of scale on your side. So you have to do a war chest, right? And that's how Uber did it. They got a ton of VC money and they were willing to offer rides at 60% of the price. The price incentive was enough for customers to switch even if they were unfamiliar with the platform. Strangers driving your car, you have to trust that Uber is legally liable and making sure that they've done the background checks, all that stuff, right? But the cost incentive is enough. And in order for you to do that, I'll still keep the lights on, even just as a business, pay for infrastructure costs, all that stuff. I just don't know. You probably have to be VC backed, right, to make it work, unless you figured it out. And if you approach and you show me the numbers and you've cracked it like that, then that to me is something worth getting involved with. But unless that's the case, those are immediately going to be, I think, not even just my questions. Those are, like, any investor is going to be like, well,
Right.
how are you going to do this?
How you going to compete?
How you going to compete?
100%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ideas aside now, where do you think, I guess, which platform do you think is the best place to kind of start, and why? By platform, not only just in terms of web, mobile, desktop, but you're mentioning before the Shopify's, the Twitches, and those marketplaces and plugins.
Interesting. Like, where is the best place to begin?
Right.
So I think that we've talked a lot about this validation idea, right? And I think if you can identify an opportunity, like it goes beyond an idea, right? That you've identified like a hypothesis, right? An educated guess. I think that there are so many tools that allow you to validate the market without having to build a product. Now, of course, it depends, right, on the product per se. But I think an example that I can give of this is that there's this company called Hims, which was a new business and became a unicorn like almost overnight. And they were founded by a company called Atomic, which is kind of like a version of an incubator. They kind of just launch new products, and then they hire teams to take it over. They hold share as that company grows. They have the network of like getting VCs, all that stuff. But Hims was a really interesting idea because what the product is that it is a platform for men and women. There's Hims for men, Hers for women, that sells supplements or I guess like medication for things that society has deemed it to be embarrassing to have, like male pattern baldness, erectile dysfunction, etc. Those are the two main avenues that Hims started off with selling the products for. What they recognized was that there was a market mismatch in the existing products, which is Rogaine and Viagra. So those are brand name products with massive companies behind them that have the formulation under copyright that they were marketing towards older gentlemen who typically have those issues. But what happened was that the base of the actual generic version of that medication, at the time when Hims was preparing to tackle it, it was gonna be released. Like the copyright was ending, and this was like finasteride, minoxidil, and then I can't remember exactly which one Viagra is, but the generic of that was
Right.
freely available for people to manufacture and buy and sell. So they recognized that, one, there was a marketing mismatch between the existing giants, right, in the fact that they were targeting the older gentlemen. But there was a lot of young men who are having these same problems. And because it's a product, one, that you have to continuously buy, you can't really go off of it. But two, these were the same category of people that were having the issues that were more amplified because of their age, right? Like older gentlemen most likely were married, had kids, weren't necessarily needing the product as badly as the younger gentlemen who were still dating, still looking for a partner, right? Still wanted to start a family. So in that aspect, they were like, well, okay, how do we target that? So they were like, well, one of the things is that a lot of these products have an angle to them, and the marketing around it is very much like, oh, you have an old person problem, right? There's something wrong with you.
Right.
So instead, they completely branded their marketing around it as very young. It almost looks like a Zara ad, very hip, modern colors, young people, right? Very diverse, etc. Like much less shameful. But they didn't have to build a product for that. They didn't have to source any of the logistics of, the distribution of the medication, any of that stuff. Instead, what they did was that they just launched a series of Facebook ads on a landing page. The landing page you can even build in a tool like Webflow, right? As far as platforms go, you can build landing pages without hiring somebody. Webflow is a great tool for that. Very easy. You can even do it kind of for free, pretty much, right? If you just have one or two landing pages. Run some Facebook ads. I think they ran $500, $1,000 worth over a weekend. They got like 3,000 email signups. All that can be done
wild.
on a shoestring budget, right? I think that is a great way to validate if there's interest even in this idea you have, right? Where you sell this thing, which is kind of a hypothesis, right? It's more than just an idea. You're essentially at that point where you've pieced together all of these things, right? And that is the idea of like discrete shipping, right? Modern marketing, young target audience, getting this in front of them and being like, hey, are you interested in that?
Right.
Before we even like have a product built for that. That I think is a great place for entrepreneurs, right? Even technical or non-technical, anyone who's entrepreneurial, as an approach to start figuring out, is there interest in this? Can I validate the market to some degree, right? I think that is a fantastic place to begin validating an idea and using a platform before, talking about all the deep technical parts of it, right? And if a scrappy entrepreneur came and showed me that they had done that degree of work or thought outside the box in that approach to it, that tells me so much more about
For sure.
the person,
Right.
and their professionalism, seriousness to the approach.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a great example of like being able to almost bootstrap your way to that idea validation. And once you kind of have that, moving on to like a proof of concept. Again, I still think even at that stage, you don't necessarily need to sink a whole bunch of money and time into building out this full app or website, right? Using something like, again, for him, like I think the next step, if you get that idea validation, would be to like, okay, let's actually get a storefront up and start taking orders.
Yeah.
In that scenario, rather than building all that from scratch or using one of these larger enterprise level platforms, just using something simple like Shopify.
Yeah.
To get started. Like there's always room or opportunity to swap that out later on.
Yeah.
But just to get started, you really want to simplify your playbook.
Yeah.
And again, the hypothesis piece is like, oh, okay, I think there's going to be a demographic of, young men looking to purchase this product. Let's put a landing page up, prove that there's interest there, collect the signups. Oh, okay, great. Now I think that they'd be willing to pay for this. Let's get the storefront up. Oh, they're starting to pay for it. Great.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can refine all those pieces to make it, a little bit more professional, run faster. Again, you're optimizing at that point.
Yeah.
Right. But at each stage, you're still trying to answer a question. And I think what the mistake I've made many times in my career is trying to rush to the end and not breaking those steps down and taking the time to validate each step to see if my original hypothesis is still correct.
Yeah.
Right. You want to build up to your big idea.
Yeah.
By starting. So again, if you have a great idea for an app, does it need to be an app to start to get that to prove that behavior exists? Can you build it as a Chrome plugin?
Right.
It's gonna be faster and cheaper to build that, to hire somebody. And if you validate that behavior, say, okay, great, the Chrome plugin works. Now let's actually build it as a web app, and then from there maybe build it as a mobile app.
Yeah.
So there's always steps you can take. You don't necessarily need to go out and hire the best dev. And I think even approaching your potential technical co-founder with that step-by-step process, like, hey, listen, I understand that you could build me, given enough time and money, a competitor for Uber or YouTube. I don't want to do that. I want to start here at this stage first, and then from there we can validate and keep validating and keep building up. And again, that shows me that you've done some real deep thinking on the idea and the approach. And again, gives you time to figure out the business side around it, like the marketing piece, figuring out some logistics, figuring out the distribution model.
Yeah.
Because those things are important, right?
Yeah.
Nothing is more frustrating than sinking weeks, months, years into building something.
Yeah.
Only for people not to adopt it. You built the wrong product for the wrong audience.
Yeah.
And all those things kind of take time to figure out.
Could you have done that in parallel?
Absolutely. So rather than just building that thing, throwing it in the market and seeing if the audience accepts it, like build something smaller, see if the audience accepts it. If not, maybe try a different audience, then a different audience. If nobody's interested, then just nobody's interested.
Yeah.
Abandon the idea. But if you find a different audience than what you initially thought, okay, then, tweak your hypothesis, keep expanding and growing on that. And they say that, like, that's why so many of these success stories they see for these entrepreneurs and all these startups, it's actually like their third, fourth, fifth, 10th idea in.
Yeah.
People just kept pivoting and learning and trying new things. It's very rare that it's this one magical idea that somebody had somewhere in a coffee shop, wrote down on the back of a napkin and said, this is going to make us millions.
Yeah. It makes for a good headline. It makes for a
great
story.
Movies.
Yes.
Love watching that. But
it's not real life.
It's not real life.
I'm kind of curious. You alluded to this earlier, but in that perspective, a lot of some of the, I think, like the complexity is some people think that you hire, let's say, like a really senior technical engineer, right? And you're like, oh, this person can build me YouTube. But I think that one clarification that we should make is that that person can build you the structure, but why is it that YouTube has engineering teams, hundreds, thousands of people, tens of thousands, right?
Yeah.
What is that going into, would you say, really, right? Because a lot of that comes as part of the education piece of what the cost of the technical is going to be, right? More users.
I mean, something like YouTube is a huge service. Like the idea that you just go to a website, you can watch a video, seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple. But when you actually start breaking it down, there's a lot of complexity in there. Like the first thing that comes to mind is even just uploading the videos and storing it, right? You're going to need to optimize those algorithms. Be able to, one of the core functions for YouTube is uploading videos.
Yeah.
That should not break
In 4K.
or go down in 4K. So you're going to need to store all those things. You're going to need teams around that in itself to manage that piece. Then retrieving the video and being able to, again, have it encoded in different quality formats and everything. That's another different specialization, right? And then from there, there's the comment section and features. There's search, which is, search is a huge complexity problem in computer science. I mean, there's just a lot of different areas to building that app that somebody could build a, I guess, rudimentary version of it just themselves, but the maintenance around it,
the improvement of it,
is going to be intense.
Yeah. And you need dedicated teams for that.
You need dedicated teams for that.
Yeah.
Right. There's a reason why we have in tech SREs as its own function.
Yeah.
Because somebody could build it, but to maintain it is its own separate job.
Right. SREs being site reliability engineers that focus on the uptime of the service or just, the platform altogether.
Right.
Yeah.
Availability, fault tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think that's the thing too, is that like understanding that the business you're building requires it to be at that scale, right? Some products are just not designed to have small technical teams, just given the scope of what makes it competitive, right? Like music streaming, for example, is a great one. If you're planning on, I mean, unless you're planning on servicing a very small number of users, maybe you have
That's the
something
thing. If you
really
want to build Spotify
rare.
for one person, like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's gonna be
no
easier.
problem. Yeah. But if it's like hundreds of thousands, millions of
Yeah,
users where people are streaming billions of hours,
yeah,
that those pipes are extremely expensive to maintain.
right. And because
Yeah.
it's again, you're not just storing these audio files, these video files in one place,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's say you're storing them in New York. If you're living in New
Right.
York,
Yeah.
it's gonna be very fast to serve it to you.
Yeah.
But if you're living on the West Coast, or in a different country halfway
Mhm.
across the world,
Yeah.
it's gonna take time to get that data to you
Yeah.
on your phone. So it's gonna be really slow to load. It's gonna be
Mhm.
buffer. It's gonna be choppy.
Yeah.
So that means you have to replicate that data storage to different data centers around the world.
Yeah.
And again, that's just multiplying your cost.
Right.
And
And it's
then again-
increasing the complexity.
And you need a way to manage all that. So I don't know. Let's say the copy in New York goes down
Yeah.
or isn't available.
Yeah.
Where are you pulling it from next?
Yeah.
And then how do you recover New York to get
Yeah.
it back up?
Yeah. Or if changes happen in New York, you need to propagate those changes in other places
Yeah.
on a schedule that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it's a very elegant puzzle for, I think, like us to want to figure out, right? That's the part that gets us excited. But then knowing the cost of that too, it's like, I think one thing you really alluded to that was really interesting is that it's extremely frustrating to build something that doesn't get used, right? Because a lot of what we're doing is creating a lot of times,
Mhm.
as you mentioned, like a rudimentary version, like a POC. We know we're not building the best version, nowhere close to it, but we need to attack the market quickly. We want to be able to improve upon it. And if we can't even ever get there, right? If you never like launch products, if you never get it out into the wild, hit those feedback loops, right? There's almost nothing more frustrating because yeah, you can pay me to do it, right? I'll do it, but like, what was the point of it? I want to make something that the world actually uses.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that just comes down to personality too.
Yeah.
Right. Some people happy just to build something, if it gets thrown away, that's fine. They're collecting their check.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
I guess there's almost more of a enjoyment in the craft of programming and building.
Yeah.
And that's where their sole
Product.
enjoyment comes from.
Yeah. Building
Right.
product.
But I think for us, we're the type of engineers where a lot of the enjoyment actually comes from building the product, getting it out there,
Mhm.
and having people use it and being able to, again, iterate on it, right? And I think that speaks more to our entrepreneurial nature than it does our engineering nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So another question here for you, because we're living in the generative AI age right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost seems that unless you're building a product with AI in it, you're missing the mark right now.
Yeah.
But I wonder for you, what would be more important in an idea? Is building in AI to start or building it as a global product to start first?
Interesting. Wait, can you tell me the difference in your mind with like when you say a global product versus an AI product?
Yeah. So a AI product has some kind of AI function built in
Mm-hmm.
that the user interacts with, whether it be like ChatGPT.
Gotcha.
Yeah, some claim
Mhm.
that the
AI is
team is
doing
making
something.
that powered by ChatGPT or
Gotcha.
similar
Powered by AI.
large language model in there. Versus the global product it's available in more than one region. So in the States, it's not just available in the States; it's available in North America, Europe, globally, and you kind of have that advantage there.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that from that perspective, like AI is a really, really hot topic right now in the same way that crypto was 5 years ago, right? In that it hit mass adoption, the news cycles picked it up, right? And everyone's chattering about it as this game changer that's coming. And I think for me, it's important not to get lost in that noise, but also recognize the crazy opportunity that it can be, right? I think building something with AI in mind requires a deeper understanding of what exactly the AI space is at right now, right? I think even with like these GPT models, like you're really just leveraging an existing tool that was created and using whatever they do to help solve something. Um, and that might help in that validation piece. But what you mentioned earlier about like, not tying yourself to some platform, right, that might get hit with regulations, might go down, whatever. And that is pretty much a core massive feature of how my business works, is something that I'm not keen to do. I think like I'm willing to do it to validate like quickly whether or not, rather than hiring maybe specialists, et cetera, to help develop part of what makes it work, right? If that takes a lot of time, like for example, if I wanted to make an underwriting service, right, which was just an application, somebody submits like an IPO request, and then I have AI, I need a bunch of underwriters to figure out like all the legal stuff of all that. Oh, obviously that takes a massive amount of time, right? It's an enormous amount of time to do that, which is why it does have such prestigious firms that specialize in doing that. And doing AI obviously seems like something where you're like, oh my God, that thing could do that, right? But you could validate quickly if people are even willing to do that through a platform, potentially with AI. But then like the complexity of that is that if that ever gets regulated, your entire business is gone, right? Now you have to go back to that process. And at that point, if you have clients, you have investors, you have whatever that are like breathing down your neck, you've overextended yourself, right?
Right.
So I think like if I had an existing business I needed to validate, or I had already built an existing business and AI made it faster, but I already had that sauce figured out, then I think I would be more comfortable going in that direction. At least that's, I think, for the majority of cases. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of new tools, et cetera, that use AI to solve things. I mean, at least in the existing models we have, right? The large language models, maybe the neural networks, et cetera. But I think that for me, that with the AI is still where I see it. It's a tool to solve something that must already exist, right? From my standpoint, I think like for me, that's where I would see the value.
Right.
I don't know about where you stand on.
Yeah, what's
the AI
interesting?
piece of
Like,
it.
there's obviously pros and cons to both sides. I
Yeah.
think right now we're in such a wave of AI being that hot topic, right? Again, to your point, it's like 5-4 years ago, where if you didn't have blockchain, or if you had blockchain in your pitch deck or something, investors were throwing money at you.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like it's easier to raise capital, get people on board, build hype and excitement around your idea if there's an AI element to it.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I'm wary of is the actual use and application of the AI in your product. And it feels, if it's just like slapping on AI and it's solving a problem that doesn't need AI, it feels almost like a waste. Like it's a gimmick.
Yeah.
At that point, right? It's almost more trouble than it's worth. Whereas again, I think there's a lot of things that we can do now with AI that are, again, a lot easier. Would have taken larger teams, lots more money. That it adds a new dimensionality to an idea or product. I think those use cases are really interesting. Again, the kind of chatbot style apps make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Where you can give almost like a level of customer support, or make your app a little bit more context aware.
Yeah.
Given a train model, which I think is, again, adds a level of to the user experience.
Yeah.
Which can help elevate your app. I don't know how well it function as an idea just in of itself, but again, it does add that supercharged boost to an idea.
Yeah.
Which makes, I think, a lot of sense. Whereas a global product, depending on where you live, can really be a game changer for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're not building in a high growth market, that can stifle your idea from day one.
Yeah.
Where lessons that we've learned is trying to build products in Canada can be very difficult, right? Just the mentality of the consumer base here is a little different towards financial products than it is, say, somewhere in the States or Europe.
Yeah.
Where people are much more, a little bit looser regulation in some aspects. But I think it's more just the consumers are more willing to adopt and try different financial products.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
in Canada, people are,
Conservative.
yeah, a little bit more conservative in their technology choices and like just comfortable with the options that they have right now.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an insight that you can only really learn having gone through it a little
Right.
bit, or I
Yeah.
guess if you know are really smart and pay attention to people that have tried it, and been met with some challenges there. But I think by building a global product, something that can work in multiple markets, you're able to multiply your efforts, right? So maybe it didn't, or it's not growing as quickly in Canada, but
Mhm.
you know the States is booming, or it's available in Europe or Africa. You can take advantage of those markets.
Yeah.
Now again, the marketing efforts are going to be different,
Right.
right? So that
The
so the
legal.
complexity, the legal,
Yeah.
there's added complexity there.
Mhm.
Depending on your industry, is going to be different regulations around even language support,
Right.
right? Like some places
Payment support potentially.
payment support as well. But again, I mean, there's Stripe for instances like that, which might
Yeah.
help, right? So
Yeah. But then you are tied to them in the sense that if they are not allowed to be in those countries, you're also
right, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of trade-offs in both.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, I would lean towards the global product
That's your philosophy.
being right now. I don't know if I call
Yeah.
it philosophy. It's not as
Yeah.
strong as a
Yeah.
philosophy,
Or-
but I think
yeah. Sorry.
I would
Yeah.
look
Preference.
for that. Yeah, that's my preference right now. I'd look for
Mhm.
that first, versus something that uses AI when it doesn't need to.
Yeah.
But that being said, if it was a great use case for AI, then I think that would be more enticing than the global product offering, just because of all the extra complexity that may or may not be there depending on the industry you're in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you just offer it in English, but again, it's available globally and it's not something that's tied to something regulatory, then you should be fine.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like taking a global is just a dimension, and that dimension can flex itself in different ways, right? Like I think a lot of times people do say start regional and then grow because, you know,
Mhm.
you get to validate in one market per se.
Yep.
But I do agree that if you're able to consider it as a factor up front, you can technically build it small with a global audience in mind. You just have to be better at finding a common denominator that you can
Yeah,
reduce it down to.
your I guess ideal customer segmentation is going to be different.
Yeah.
In that way, I almost see like more of a horizontal slice
Yeah.
across different regions
Yeah.
versus the vertical slice of like, okay, going down into this region,
Yeah.
understanding the behaviors of this customer, down to where they work, where they eat, you know, their behaviors, because that's
Mhm.
going to vary across societies and countries.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's a really interesting one. I would love to work on that just because from a approach standpoint, to be able to tackle it with that in mind, right? I feel like the learning that you would get as an individual, as a person, would be so much more expansive. It feels like, right? And it does teach you a lot more about human behavior, product development
Yeah.
cycles, all that stuff.
And I think if you're interested in that, definitely it almost feels exciting because it does feel kind of like anthropological in that sense,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, to build this feature, we have to understand how the people are going to be using this app in their day to day,
Yeah.
and what those commonalities are, what those differences are.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of cool. Again, just understanding how people
Work.
go about work and live their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That would be interesting. I mean, if knowing that if somebody approached me with that and gave me that exact same approach calculation in it, I would probably sign up and try that out. Get on board with that. That's a really interesting idea because I mean, it's very rare that people from the outset want to build something with a global reach, right? Just because there is so much variance and difference between user behavior, et cetera. And at least that's how we're taught too, especially in our product development. We seem to stylize product development cycles in narrowing down as much as possible a specific user persona, down to the age range, down to the
Mhm.
background, down to the neighborhood they live in, right? Down to their job, down to how many kids they have. All of those segmentations in a user profile are so specific.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you can still do that and still have global availability,
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe
right?
maybe
So
your
you
approach
can
is to find
focus your
yeah.
marketing on that ideal customer segment,
Mm-hmm.
but then open and but still have the product available in
Yeah.
different regions
And see if it
and
exists
see
in
if it'll
multiple places.
exactly because those common threads may be able to get picked up somewhere else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be a really interesting approach, I think.
Yeah, I think that comes down to again depending on what idea you're building out. If you're using different platforms and tools, if they have global availability, like
Yeah.
um, for example, Financial Space, there's Plaid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's available in Canada, US,
Mm.
Europe, other regions. Rather than saying, okay, I'm only going to focus on this one specific slice,
Mm.
if the platform already supports multiple regions,
Yeah.
does it make sense for your app to also be? Is there a way to build it where it, since that already supports those regions, that you can just have those people also sign up and use your product in a way that generates value for them?
Yeah.
And if that's inexpensive from a time or money perspective, like why not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. That would be, I mean, it is really, really interesting, even just from a product approach standpoint, right? Man,
Yeah, I mean, different
yeah,
strategy,
yeah, different strategy,
different
very,
strategy.
very novel in that sense, right? And off that interest alone, I think there are ways to approach things that are interesting that you could also come at somebody with, like, from that perspective. But maybe that, yeah, I don't know. That is intriguing enough that I would be curious, right? Curiosity, I think, is another big thing too. If you can tap into somebody from that perspective,
Yeah, got to
but
capture their imagination.
but that's the thing, right? Like, but we have an existing relationship, long working history. Like we've been friends for such a long time that, like, I think in that sense, you know me too, right? What you could approach me with that would resonate with me, that helps in terms of
Well, I mean, now
getting
everybody else
people
is
on
going to
board.
know it too.
Yeah.
You're going to get your inbox flooded with proposals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Finding a technical founder or even just approaching technical talent. I think a lot of it is a lot more straightforward than I think it seems, right? I think the big thing for me is just don't let your ambition necessarily cloud you from seeing like the perspective that the other person sits in, right? Where are they at in their career? What are they bringing to the table? You have to be able to know that and match it. Go for it. Go for broke, right? Don't stop yourself from being ambitious, gunning for that top, but just be prepared, right? Come with the equivalent professionalism and equivalent work done already. Figure out what you don't know that you don't know, right? So that even if I'm aware that, of course, you're not a software engineer, you might not even be in the software industry, right? But just knowing that you're approaching it from this perspective where you're not like this young bull, right? That's just rushing in and trying to use your enthusiasm as a hammer for everything is going to be much more enticing to me, right? That you're more calculated in your personality, that you're willing to do that work, right? That we're not going to stumble through this and I have to handhold you through a part of
Right.
this business, right? That I'm just going to expect you to be able to handle on your own in order for us to work together, in order to tackle the real problems of identifying a product, right? That actually hits in the market. I want there to be as minimal amount of internal friction as possible. And that can only be done if I know that you're going to come and match me as a partner that I want to partner with from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great summarization. I think, your ambition can only take you so far.
Mm-hmm.
It can only mask so many other things, right? There's going to need to be some kind of plan and strategy if you're trying to approach and work with somebody more experienced or tenured, right? If you want them to take you seriously.
Yeah.
And I think, again, starting with smaller projects, whether it is like, hey, let's build a landing page, let's build a plugin, let's build something on an existing platform just to get a sense of how we work together, work through challenges. Can we figure out how to market and get people using our products before trying to take that big swing?
Yeah.
It's going to not only help the communication and going to get learnings from how the two you work together, but the confidence boost
Yeah.
you're going to get from that, from like even having small wins and small successes, is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's great. Don't want the message to ever be like, oh, you shouldn't approach
Absolutely not.
potential partners.
Yeah.
I think,
We want you to approach us.
yeah, I
We
think
want to
it's
do new
very
things.
exciting. Yeah.
Mhm.
But at the same time,
There's a better approach to it. Right?
there's always a better approach to it than just having, random idea and approaching somebody you don't know and be like, hey,
Yeah.
there's got to be some level of thought put into it.
Yeah. Of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, again, another question is to ask yourself what type of founder or entrepreneur you want to be in tech,
And who do
VC
you want?
backed,
Yeah.
bootstrapped, really understanding the trade-offs there and how that relates to the idea you have, and what that's going to mean for the type of person you want to bring in and partner with.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. I think with that, yeah, it's a wrap for this one.